Alright, so I don't think there's any question here. This setup is significantly better. Not only is there a lack of the dirty dishes, there's also it's just one of those good days where you feel slightly more prepared, and there's something to say about that. But I want to get right into it. There's into the program. So you can see there's this chart, this pie here, a pie chart that, and we're going to go over the history of cognitive psychology. I guess that everybody is familiar with it, and it happens to have originated with, I'm making carrot cake today, and with carrot cake, you actually have a lot of garbage too. So I was gonna just make some brownies, but this slideshow is not just your ordinary slideshow. I got an apple over here. That one looks good. Ooh. Okay, so first you need to peel all the garbage off. Okay, but there's some couple components to this field, as you can see. And so what we'll do is sort of go over each of them. Now, cognitive psychology is not your ordinary psychology because it has it's trouble talking about people. Since the beginning of time, really, man has attempted to explain the mind. And even cavemen, they had, anyway, I'm not going to go too much into it, but you can see here's the cliffs of Dover, and this sort of a proof. You would see some Neanderthals and Homo species, different types of Homo sapien, right next to some axes, some like primitive, simple tools. They'd be right next to each other, and up here you'd have. Anyway, there were so many species back then that people literally had trouble telling one from the other. We're talking about so many different kinds of animals, like that you would end up with a bear, and you'd be like, oh, this is a polar bear, and you don't, and here's a other bear, and you don't know how to tell them apart. I know that sounds bad, but it was tough back then, and there were all kinds of animals around. So then, people in actually quite a long time ago, they started to talk about evolution, and that's a theory that everything goes from homogeny into heterogeneity, so more complex groupings and whatnot that are grouped to get stuff. Now, what is this little guy? That is so okay, I'm not just gonna put those in the oven. We'll homogeneity. Oh, cool! This apple. I've seen one of these before. I don't know what kind of apple it is. You know, there's like so many kinds of species of apples that. Let me just cut my head off. There's so many species of apple that supposedly one could eat an apple every day for the rest of their lives and never have the same species of apple twice. Speaking of species, is this? No, did we? Oh, right. We're right into mechanics because we're talking about cognitive psychology. And I know people would like to hear about mechanics. So what was the earliest one? This was way back then. I mean, steam engines were just coming out of mines. They were being used for boats, they were being used for another apple here, for looms in factories. Factory weaving was one of the first steam uses, but I mean, that wasn't for a while. Before that, they had jacquard punch blocks. You could fit it, you could retrofit it, or whatever you want to call it. You could attach it to your standard loom. Every home had one, and you can see the patterns that were on there. And it would make a figured and fancy pattern. Did I write? Yeah, I wrote that. That is excellent. You'd have flowers. You'd have all kinds of patterns to your bed sheets, and you could do it right out of your home. You could even punch your own blocks. This was very inspirational to people, and at this same juncture, inventor Charles Babbage was, I think he was, anyway, I don't know if they were dating, but I think she ended up actually marrying someone else. I'm not into drama, but they were together, imagining together how to weave algebra, because he was making these now this is actually peeled. Look at this apple. I mean, I don't want to compare, but what is this even? It looks like, okay, get this out of here. Yeah. So he was building an adding machine. I know it seems like really basic today, like, oh, isn't that really easy to build? No, it was not. And he built one, and then they imagined the punch blocks for anything, like, oh, if you can build that, then couldn't you like attach it to a loom also, and then you could analyze everything. Everything's algebra. Everything you could do, analyze it. That was their dream. And around this same time, you had another person dreaming. He was an invalid. He was just wretched, sick man, and he was the first psychologist, and was sick. And this lady he knew, he lived on the Rhine, and she had some crazy pickled ham that she brought to this sick young man at the time, 1840-ish, 1840s. He comes up with this idea called psychophysics. Now, at the same time, Charles Darwin is sailing in the Galapagos. What else was happening in the 40s? All kinds of nothing. I mean, this was this guy, and that's just what he did. He weighed things, he thought about them, he was imagining, well, what had happened was he may not use all these carrots. Fechner was sick. She gave him a pickled ham. He loved it. He ate it every day. 100% better. He was like, this is it. This is amazing. There must be some psychology. People had, for a long time, thought about psychology. Ever since the earliest written texts, 5,000 years ago, people said the mind, it must have something to it, like senses. And then once it's in the senses, something happens. And he was the first person to quantify it. Now, you may think, why would you do that? Well, I mean, Charles Babbage and Ada Lovelace, they were thinking about it. this was a time when people had started to think like, what is the universe made of? It's all homogeneous mess. There's undifferentiated nothing. How do I make sense of this? I don't know what their problem was, but you don't really need a problem. You can just be thinking about it. Then he was, yeah, so Darwin comes back and he's amidst all these people talking about their theories of evolution. How did they proved it with the homogeneity and heterogeneity, natural. If you put stuff together like sugar and sugar water, then it eventually becomes a crystal, right? That's something that is a proof of evolution. This theory he had was actually it still is. It's never been proved with science, but it has been proved with a proof because you look at everything close enough and you can see traits. So that's what he came up with. Traits, and it was very catchy, much more simpler to understand than your chemical mess. And he endorsed a number of other people in his work, and it's very popular, and there you go. Here's Breuer and Freud. Now, little known fact was just how sick everybody was. Oh, apples. Okay. Psychiatry had long existed as a field, and people they wouldn't necessarily get locked up, but they would, just the psychiatric hospitals, they were really struggling big time, and there was all these hystericals, mostly women, who hysteria was like nowadays, I'm not going to compare, but the point is that people would they didn't really have any way to deal with them until Breuer sat this lady down, Bertha Pappenheim, whom we later find out is her, but they called her Anna, and he cured her. She came to him blind, and one of her arms wasn't working, and he talked to her, and she'd feel his hands, and she'd say, "Oh, my good old friend," and then he'd look at her and talk to her, and then she could see him, and then she was cured for a little while, and then she'd go home and be blind again. And you can see here she is. But what he did was excavate. Yes, excavation. And nowadays it's Marilyn Monroe even she was excavated. I'm gonna save this for some soup. And I'm getting stuff out of here, because that's just what we're doing. And I'm still testing this theory of this counter. Oh, I could really put it back here, but we have the computer. I'm just gonna go with it, man. You got this. So it's called the regressive technique. I think that it's pretty common. Everybody knows psychoanalysis today, but back then you wouldn't talk to one of them. You couldn't talk to one of them. Them being somebody who's unhysterical. This is the times everybody went to the fair. Why did they go to the fair? 5 to 10 million people went to the World's Fair. They took a train. They just completed all these railroads. This is incredible. Incredible. They built an international village just for the fair. Helmholtz Nice. I was actually going to say that before I saw the trigger. He had proved nerve conduction. What is a nerve? Oh, I got some garbage on the table. I'm having a fun time this morning. I don't even remember what I was going to talk about. Very cool. And he proved the speed of it. Helmholtz was very mathematician. You know, he went to the fair, and then he was very soon after that he got dementia and kept talking about it to everybody. So here we are. Everybody's excited about this and that, and I think I'm actually going to get the oven going. I hope that we've got the coffee on back there. We've got the TV. We'll see if this fuse holds today. Yeah, this is the reality is that psychology, who cares about it? They were in labs. They were all in labs, just chipping away at their. Fechner was like weighing this and that, and he did this thing where he'd exercise and then he'd like try to think or something, and he couldn't even think anymore because he was so stupid because his whatever. He was that was the reality. Is nobody cares about psychology. Nobody cares about most of the sciences, but the proof was in the pudding. They were going at it. Where's that butter? They were proving this and that or something. I don't know what they were doing. They were just, someday we'll look at their texts and say that they were on to something. And the world was just moving right along. Oh, but what does this have to do with cognitive psychology? I should have a little thingy, like the title of this presentation. Cognitive psychology pie. What is that even? Now, I have so much of this that I'm gonna actually make 2 out of it. I'm actually not gonna make 2, I'm gonna make some cupcakes too. Wonder. So I mean, I probably don't have to butter all these, but I'm going to just because I have enough. This is so cool. I'm going to do this every time that I have to cook because it's so much more fun to cook when you have something to talk about with. And I mean, I know all this. It took me like really fast to do that. Where was it? There it is. So Pythagorean theorem. With it, they proved calculus. I guess that people were surprised to see calculus, but it was just really like, okay, this is what people are doing. They're slowly gonna build this, analyze everything machine. We're moving right along, and people were going to the fair. They were curing hysterics. What more could you ask for? Oh, the Principia Mathematica. What is that even? Imagine you have any statement you can think of, even crazy statements, like a statement, like a proposition, this and that, therefore something. Get those shells out. Now, supposedly, you get a disease if you don't wash your hands. You don't. I mean, maybe it would take a long time to prove it. So, Gödel he actually took them up on their challenge. He said, you guys can't prove this. Nobody can prove this. This is the craziest thing you've ever seen. Nobody's seen it before, ever. He said, is that right? It can prove everything, but can it prove that it is not incorrect? Because obviously any proof can prove the negation of itself. A good logical system. Any system can say, I don't exist. I am not here, or something. That's any good old logical system has, like, it's pretty easy. You just say, like, not 1931. And the reality is, I think that this is not the correct quote here, but what did I say when I wrote the version? If the Principia is a system that is complete, it must contain within it a disproof of the Principia's completeness. So therefore, his incompleteness theorem, you can see there's different kinds of logic. I need to put some, I have both of them there, okay? It's only seeing one. So here's mu. You have all these rules. You start with mi. I was reading that book, the Gödel Escherbach book. Yeah, that was a good one. So the reality is, like, okay, that's mechanical. Who cares? What does that have to do with cognitive science? Well, if anybody knows about cognitive science, they know that it has a lot to do with it. This is absurd. So everybody was really inspired. They said, oh, how does he do that? How did he just look? Can you imagine your best and your brightest? They come out and say, this is it. This is the end of the world. It's done, man. We don't need this, man. What am I? It's done. We've proved it. Math, if you want to know about it, just check out this. And it's like there's so many metaphors you can think of here, but it really inspired the age of revolutions. People, all of a sudden, they didn't look at their adding machines in the same way. They didn't think, they bought this. This one's a little later. They thought this thing would eventually, like, hook up to your teeth. I don't even know what they thought, but does anybody know Turing? Wow, I can't believe I'm done with this already. Can you believe that? Suddenly there's radios, TVs, internet, and everybody's like, how do we even explain people anymore? Replacement theory, AI, we're gonna be robots. Oh, there it is. No, I'm just gonna put all of this in here. It's all gonna go in right now. I'm trying to make them thinner because it happens to mold if you put too much in. This is the last slide. This is actually a Gestalt experiment. It isn't strict. There's no strict delineation from one psych to the other, but this is a good psych test because you give people bottles of ink is how it started, and then they would have to like, what is this bottle of ink? What am I supposed to do with it? I need another spoon. And it took people such a long time, and also they would do experiments with like cutting out chunks of brains and having them try to do the Stroop test, and they actually figured out, did they? Today, who really cares? They figured out like this part of your brain is about reading and this part is about seeing, and this part is, so there's brain regions. Cool, huh? Very cool. Very cool. That's just too cool. It's really good to know because in the future someday, when we are reading brains, we'll have to know when somebody's thinking about seeing or when they're thinking about reading. I actually think that that's pretty cool. And they proved it. They proved that uh-oh, I'm low on battery. I don't know sometimes on videos you can't really hear the other noises as loud as like in person, but who cares? Yeah, so what does that prove? That proves that there's different parts of your brain that are processing, to use the cognitive psychology. Loves talking about machines, and without all the machines, then they wouldn't really have much to talk about. Uh-oh. There's not very much left anymore. Oh, right. I was going to give an example of, I have the computer here. I guess I'm doing screen double. That's too bad. But what does it sound like when people are talking about cognitive psychology? Where is it? History of, yeah, this is the name of the paper I wrote. History of Psychology of, let me go to the end. Is it, oh, it's over this way. Right, so, I mean, I kind of wrote some stuff here, but where is this stupid thing where you're like, oh yeah, this is what it sounds like when you're a cognitive psychologist? No, I guess a little earlier. There's my references. Oh yes, here it is. Okay, first of all, I'm going to take a little bit from there and then I'm going to put it more in here. So yeah, I actually already wrote this paper, but in the future, what I'm going to try to do is different orders. So I'm going to do like the messed up, awful version while I'm cooking. And then maybe I'll take like a transcript of the video if I think of something. You can see what holds water when you're talking out loud and not. And yeah, so oh right, what does cognitive psychology sounds like? In the serial process of forming a perception from mere sense, what was homogeneous, undifferentiated sense is processed into heterogeneity. Parallel processings, see, they're very logical. Parallel processings occur whence during the serial process of heterogeneitizing, yeah, they use words like that, this sense is a cognition wherein these serial processes occur simultaneously. Yes, the simultaneous processing. We're out of battery, dude. I know this computer, and I know that I am done, but I am going to sprinkle some brown sugar on this before I throw it in the oven. But there you have it. Oh, the mind turns undifferentiated sense into heterogeneous processing, all the different senses, and eventually a perception. Cognitive psychology uses a very nuanced where's the brown sugar? There it is. Very nuanced sense processings are thereby, you could just say like you see something and then you have a response in your brain, right? That'd be simpler, but no, they're scientists. So here we are. Look at this. Oh my goodness. We have the cupcakey ones. We have and there's even more. And that's just great. Let me get a